Johnny's.
Hey, everybody. So let's see who we can get here. So, oh, wow, you guys have been busy. Hello, Mother Goose. Hello, Craze Family Homestead. Hello, Voon Child. It's not letting me go back. Simply Jan. Welcome. Looks like Britain Homestead. Oh, nope, they're going to come back. And Abby's Life, welcome. So we are going to start out here first. Microfarmer. Now, Microfarmer, I've heard you changed to Muddy Boots, then you're Microfarmer again. I heard you disappeared for a while. Glad to see you back. Great to have you back. Glad everything's okay. I worry about people when I don't see them for a while. So the weather here has been interesting. We've had some strong wind. We get a lot of strong wind out here. But I was able to get out and plow. I think on Sunday I plowed. I didn't plow. I cultivated. I took the chisel plow through. Jewel Small Gardening, how are you? I'm doing fine. And then I ran the rototiller a little bit. And then on Monday morning, Microfarmer says, never left. Okay, good. Country Homestead Preacher, welcome. So on Monday, I got my two of my sons, I should say, to help me plant potatoes. We planted 200 pounds of potatoes. I've got 8 rows, 230 feet long. And somehow, last year, I measured my field wrong, and I thought I had 150 feet. Homestead Aquarius, thank you. Welcome to the live, Homestead Aquarius. So, yeah, we got, I don't know how many potato slips we planted. I don't count them. It's not that interesting to me, but it was 8 2-gallon buckets filled with little sliced up potatoes. So we planted those, and then I was going to plant my, I've got some oversized yellow onions. I can't think of the exact name of them right offhand, but they are an oversized onion. We plant those for green onions. And, thank you. So my wife just handed me the label on them, and it doesn't even say on here. But then we planted the Rhubarb shallots, which I call them Australian banana shallots. And we've got 1,000 of them to plant. Steve Toonstra, welcome. But we've got these yellow oversized onions. I can't think of the specific name of them, but we plant those so we can get green onions. I've said this before, I'll say it again. The bigger the onion bulb you plant, the smaller the onion you're going to get. So those oversized onion sets are really good for planting for green onions or bunching onions. So, all right. I'm going to start the teaching portion of this, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, but we'll have plenty of time for questions and to chat about other things. But I want to start us off on the right foot, and we're going to talk about how plants use water. And I will tell you that the process that God created when he created the plants, and remember, without the plants, we can't survive. We cannot make our own food. We can't. Without plants, we would starve to death. So this is why God created the plants before he created the animals. But also the process, or if you're from Canada, the process of creation was such that what God created in the plants, many of the functions, many of the systems that exist in plants also exist in humans. However, and animals in general. However, there are some things that are distinctly different. Well, I want to read something to you to set the platform in the right place so that we can then work from that. We'll start at the right place. So, Romans chapter 1, I'm going to start with verse 18. Got to get these things in the right place. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all godlessness and wickedness of men who suppress the truth by their wickedness, since what may be known about God is plain to them, because God has made it plain to them. For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power, and his divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. For although they knew God, they neither glorified him as God nor gave thanks to him, but their thoughts became futile, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became fools. And they exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal man, and birds and animals and reptiles. And so I read that mostly because I want you to understand that everything that I believe starts with the fact that God created all that there is. He wasn't just pulling the strings of a process. He created. And this cannot be more clear. When you begin to look at the way that plants grow and live, the way that they move, and the way that they don't move, and the reasons for that, and the processes that cause those plants to survive, and the similarity between plants, but the difference between plants can only be explained by accepting the fact that there was a wise architect who designed everything we see. And it works the way it does because God made it do that. So let's get into the plant biology part of this. Why do plants need water? Well, plants are about 95% water, depending upon the plant. Now, the older the plant, the less water, obviously. Big trees are going to have less water in them than, say, a cabbage. Now, one interesting thing, if you've ever gone to the lumber yard and bought 2x4s, you'll notice that some 2x4s weigh very little. I mean, you pick it up and you could carry 10 of them on your shoulder. It wouldn't be a big deal. And then some of them are very heavy. And the reason for that is, well, twofold. They have resin in them, and that makes them heavy. But they also have water. And the water makes up a good part of that weight. If you've ever gone to a sawmill and bought lumber and then let it dry out, you'll note that the lumber's very heavy when you buy it from the sawmill, And then when you put it in a kiln and dry it, get it down to about 12% humidity, it's going to be light. Well, or not light, but lighter. Well, plants are the same way. I mean, our garden plants are the same way. And the way that they use water is, well, it's incredible. They use water for 4 different things. They use water for structure. In fact, without water, you've seen it, the plants just wilt and fall down on the ground. Their entire structure just degrades and falls apart. And so plants are dependent upon water for their structure, but also for movement within that structure. Then plants use water for photosynthesis, and they use water for translocation, and they use water for transpiration. So those are the 4 elements that we're going to look at today. So we begin with the structure of the plant. Now, plants are made up of 3 basic cells. You know, a word about that for a second. When I was in grade school and we read about plant biology and plant cells, we learned that the cell was the smallest part of the plant and that the nucleus was the center of that cell. Well, actually, my grade school primers were a little bit behind, because even by then, by the early 70s, plant scientists had already figured out that there was more to it than cells. And the fact of the matter is that the cell is very small, microscopic. It takes a 400 power microscope to see the cell of the average plant. But within that cell, there are miles of microscopic, and not miles, I mean, obviously I'm exaggerating, but of microscopic parts. So I'm not gonna give you cell anatomy exactly, but when Darwin created the origin of the species, and when he talked about evolution, he believed that the cell was the smallest part that made up the body, whether it be animal, mineral, vegetable, not mineral, but vegetable, animal. And essentially, he believed that the body was relatively simple and very close in its construct to other animals and to plants. But when they determined that the plants were filled with acids, different acids that had different responsibility and caused different things to happen within the cell. Now, we refer to that as DNA. DNA was really formally kind of brought to become the norm in science in about 1974. And I forget now exactly when we mapped all the DNA, but I was well out of school by the time they really had mapped DNA. And so when you think about a cell, it's very complicated. Now, Darwin didn't know about that. There's a guy named David Berlinski. He's a scientist, but he's a mathematician, and he's one of the top mathematicians in the world right now. And David Berlinski was interviewed on the YouTube show Uncommon Knowledge. Now, I think actually that program was on a TV show before it made it onto YouTube. But if you watch David Berlinski on Uncommon Knowledge, he talks about the mathematical impossibility of evolution. And he made the statement, and I think this is a strong statement, he made the statement that if Darwin knew then what we know now, Darwin would not have believed in evolution. Now, Berlinski is not a believer. He says, I don't know that I believe that there was a creator. But he said, when I look at the evidence demands that we at least leave that open as an option. And he said, really, the evidence is for a creator, for an intelligent designer. Well, let me show you how this works a little bit in plants. So the greatest distinction scientifically, I suppose, between plant life and animal life is the structure of the cell. Plant cells have cell walls. The cells in our bodies and in the bodies of other animals, they don't have cell walls. And that's why we can walk about, we can move, we can get from here to there. But plants can't get up and walk around. Now, some plants, like plants that are in the ocean, they anchor themselves down and they have the ability to unanchor themselves. And they have the ability then to float and move from location to location and perhaps re-anchor themselves someplace else. But they can't choose where they're going. And I think that was part of God's plan, because plants are the only thing on earth. Well, I suppose Jason Avers would disagree with me on this if he was here. He would say that you have algae and you have fungus, and they are no longer part of the plant kingdom. But I'm old, and so they're still part of that plant kingdom in my brain. Plants are the only thing that creates food. We can't create food. We have no capacity to do it. And I've spoken about this in the past. Only plants are able to create food. So can you imagine if plants could run? If plants could get up and walk away when they wanted to, it would make the job of gardening much more difficult. And it would probably be the end of the human race if plants were able to get up and move around. So when God created plants, he created them in such a way, and all plants are this way. He created plants in such a way that they had to stay put. They have no capacity. Now they can move, and that's one of the ways that they use water. They absorb the water. Let's use that word for now, even though that's not really correct. But they absorb the water into their parenchyma cells. Now, parenchyma cells are a type of cell that is able to change the amount of water that it takes into its vacuole. The vacuole is the space in the cell where water can be absorbed or can be brought in. And the parenchyma cells control the movement of the plant. So think about heliotropic plants, like, well, all plants to a certain extent are heliotropic, but you take the sunflower that follows the sun from sun up to sundown. How does it do that? Well, the parenchyma cells, they can't move, but they expand their moisture and they contract their moisture and change the makeup of the cell in such a way that it moves the head of that plant, and it uses phototropism to do that as it moves from one point to the other. And that's how sunflower seeds get more sunlight than some other flowers might get. The other way that water is used in plants is that it creates a lot of the volume of the plant. So how does the water get up into the plant? Is there a pump down at the bottom in the roots that pumps water up? How did God create a system of overcoming gravity so that the water could be brought from the roots up into the plant? Or do plants absorb rainwater through their leaves? Well, the answer to that is sort of. All plants can absorb some water into their leaves, but not all plants can do that. Now, if you go out where Cindy lives and you look at in the high desert and you look at those plants, you'll find plants that are called aeroponic plants. And there's even a type of hydroponics that's called aeroponics. And in aeroponics, you just sort of let the water pass over the roots. Usually it's vertical. It's a mist that drops down or droplets that drop down. But in aeroponic plants, and these are becoming popular at like Walmart, you can buy a little glass vase that has a plant in it, and it picks up some water. There's an awesome video about that on YouTube, but you'd have to look under, if you typed in aeroponic plants, I suppose. There's a great video that shows how the little hairs on the end of the plant collect water from the air out of the humidity, not rainwater, and then it brings it back in. And so God has created certain plants that will overcome certain environments, but most of what we're dealing with and everything that we're growing in our vegetable garden is going to draw through its roots. Now, if there's a crack in the plant, if you have in one of the leaves, if you've got a crack in the cuticle, and you'll see this once in a while, moisture can be absorbed into that plant through osmosis. And I think the best way to describe what osmosis is that molecules will move from a place of concentration to a place of less concentration until that concentration is equalized. So trees, for example, in their bark can, through osmosis, absorb water. However, that water, hello, Gail, that water does not get into the Cambrian level. It doesn't actually feed the plant. It just hydrates the bark. All right. How does it get the water up there? Well, it uses a process called transpiration. So think of perspiring and transferring, transpiration. So the way that works is there are tubes in the structure of the plant, in the shoots of the plant. And those tubes are called xylem. And xylem do one job. They bring water from the roots and they take that water up into the plant, into the leaves of the plant. So the rest of the plant gets water and nutrition through the phloem. And the phloem goes in both directions, and that's where translocation comes into play. But in transpiration, the leaves, which God made the leaves fairly large on most plants. Now, not all plants. Pine needles are very thin, and this whole process goes on in a pine needle as well. But plant leaves are very thin, and they've got an outer cuticle, and then they've got a dermal level, and then you've got the mesophyll level, which meso means middle, and phyll means leaf. And so you've got that waxy cuticle on the top, then you've got the epidermal level, which is mostly parenchyma cells, in a leaf anyway. And then you've got the parenchyma cells, which make up the mesophyll. You've got the palisades mesophyll, and then you've got the loose mesophyll. Then you've got another dermal layer, and then you've got another cuticle. Now, on the underside of the leaf, there are stoma or stomata. So stoma is singular and stomata is plural. And the stoma open and close using water to swell and contract the cells that are on, they're called guard cells. And I'm not sure if those are parenchyma. I think so. But the guard cells are on each side of this pore, this stoma. And the stoma opens up to let out oxygen and to bring in carbon dioxide. Now, occasionally when those stoma are open, they'll bring water in, but that's not a good thing, because when the stoma are sucking water in, the water's going to the wrong place. And it actually slows down the plant's process. So what else is happening through the stoma? The stoma are there to bring carbon dioxide in and let oxygen out. Carbon dioxide is necessary for photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is the third reason why plants need water. So the plants are turning the nutrients into energy, which is food. They're using that to feed themselves, to grow their fruits, and so forth. So how does that work? How does the water make it from the ground table, where the roots are, how does it get up into the leaves? So I've been in the heating and air conditioning business for 40 years, and one of the things that I had to learn was how to work on hot water heat and how to work on steam heat. So the principle here that God used in the plant is the same principle that's used in steam heat. Now, it doesn't use it exactly the same way, but it's the same principle. As that leaf, that large leaf structure, heats up, there are veins in that leaf. And those veins are connected through the petiole to the xylem. And the xylem then goes down into the roots, and it's connected through the roots into nodes in the roots. And little tiny hairs, and I can't remember what those are called. I'll look it up and put it in the comments maybe. But those little tiny hairs pick up water, feed it into the root, and send it up the xylem. But how? Well, water in the leaf heats up, turns to a vapor. It's not quite a steam, but it turns to a vapor. When the stoma open up, it uses that vapor pressure that's created by the expansion of the water. Heat is causing the water to expand. When water turns to steam, it increases its volume by 1,000. It's 1,700 times. So a square inch of water becomes 1,700 square inches of water. That's why a fireman won't put a hose directly on a metal beam if he's anywhere near it, because the vapor pressure of the water expanding will go in every direction. It'll knock him down and he'll end up getting steam burns. So that's why you see firemen staying way away and aiming low and bringing the heat up and trying to cool things down before they, just blow themselves up. Well, the leaf is doing somewhat the same thing, only not quite as dramatically. It never makes it to steam. But as the water expands in that leaf, the leaf puts oxygen, air, into that leaf. Well, pure oxygen, actually. And the leaf opens its stoma. The guard cells open up and release oxygen full of vapor. And that vapor leaves a space in the leaf that has no water in it. And water has a tendency to stick together. So we've all done this. We've all created a siphon where you take, a hose and you put it in the fish tank and you get your mouthful of fish water and you spit that out. And then you go buy a pump and you pump it out that way. But if you can make a siphon and get a siphon going, it won't stop draining. Now, this siphon isn't powered by gravity. It's powered by evaporation. So the evaporative action in the leaf is sucking water up the stem through the xylem into the plant. And that's how your plants get the water up into them. Now, how much water does a plant need? Well, it's 95% water. And as long as it doesn't lose its own water, what does it do with the rest of the water, and why does it need it? Well, it needs it for photosynthesis. And 90% of the water that your plant consumes, it uses in the process of photosynthesis. Now, I am not in this live going to even attempt to explain how photosynthesis happens. But I'm going to go a little bit further in my explanation of how the plant uses water. Because the other way that plants use water is in translocation. And what translocation basically is movement. You're taking something, you're from here, you're moving it to there, you're moving it to there. So as that water is dragging up from the roots through the shoots into the leaves, it's sucking up nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus, sulfur, magnesium, manganese, copper, chlorine, aluminum, nickel. Nickel is something we just found out that plants need, I mean, within the last 4 or 5 years. And so what just happened? Am I still on? Sorry about that. Something came up on my computer and took me away. So the way that translocation works is in the phloem, and water is in the phloem with all of the minerals that the plant needs, everything that we've fed to the ground that the plant's drawn up. So now, how does the plant move water from here to here and from here to here? How does it feed that? How does the phloem operate? Well, the phloem operates on pressure. So the outside pressure on the plant, as it changes, it causes the phloem to go back and forth like this. And that's as much of an explanation as I'm going to give you, because that's all I understand. It gets pretty complicated, and it's something we're working on. I'm working on trying to understand better. Yes, Mike says too much nickel is not good. That's true for all micronutrients. One thing you have to remember, and this is not a popular thing necessarily to say, but God created the plants, giving the plants the ability to take up what they need and not more. And so that principle plays in two ways in our gardening philosophy. Plants will not take up more nutrient than they need, and they won't take up the wrong nutrients. However, certain things like nickel, like copper, actually just about everything, including the big three, if you've got too much of it in the soil, it does some bad things. Number one, it can cause huge deficiencies in the ability for the plant to uptake certain chemicals. And I don't know specifically with nickel. I do know that most micronutrients are pretty much available, unless, with few exceptions, micronutrients are available in your soil at quantities that far surpass what, the idea that you need to put nickel on your soil. You don't. The idea that you need to spread rock dust, unless you've got a really, well, okay, one example is if you made your entire raised bed and you used peat moss, your whole raised bed was peat moss. Good luck to you, because how's that going to work? So you need to have something in there that has the nutrients, the macro and the micronutrients in it. One year I grew all my seed starts in these. They were like 50 cell, but they were made for the hydroponics hobby or trade or industry. And you put your cells in them. I forget what they were called. They weren't rock wool, but they're almost like a piece of styrofoam. And oh man, they grew great. The germination was 100%. It was amazing. And they were a little pricey, and you can't reuse them. But I thought, oh, this is just amazing. The problem is you had to figure out how to get the nutrients to the plant because there was no nutrient there. And of course, in hydroponics, once the plant needed nutrients, they were feeding it nutrients because that's what hydroponic farmers do. They regulate nutrients to plants. And so that's what makes hydroponics great. And that's what makes hydroponics not so great. And talk to any hydroponic farmer, they'll agree that nutrients can make or break you. And there's a hydroponics farmer right there, Craps for Life. And there's a bunch of other guys in here too. Walsh Farms, welcome. Glad you're here. Bob, glad you're here. Everybody say a prayer for Bob. He's had some back surgery. He's in a lot of pain. So Craps for Life, his name's Bob. So as far as micronutrients, now if you're doing hydroponics, you need to have all those nutrients. And I'm not sure how important, perhaps some of the micronutrients aren't quite as important. But when you're planting in the field, for the most part, you're not going to be, I'm not very worried about too many micronutrients. The ones that I look at is magnesium, because magnesium will tie up, or if you don't have enough magnesium, your phosphorus will not be available. I think that's right. And then the other one for me is boron, and that's because I grow a lot of beets, and beets will deplete your boron if you don't add to them. So how do you add boron to a garden? You go buy yourself a box of borax at the hardware store. There might be cheaper ways to do it. I don't know, but borax isn't that expensive. And 2 boxes of borax will do all my beets. Once a year, put it down. The plants won't over-absorb them, but they need the boron. And if they don't, they'll get big black spots on them, and they're not attractive. And I don't know if it affects the taste. The first 2 years we didn't put boron on, but we probably had plenty of boron. The other thing that I'm a little bit short on in my garden is sulfur and manganese, not magnesium, but manganese. And that's based on the soil tests. So I really haven't really worried about manganese. I might have to now, but Mike is saying that borax will keep bugs away. Well, I might have to buy some more of it. Well, that's pretty much, what I had for today. I want you to marvel for a little bit at the complexity of a plant. And then I want you to stop and realize that those little seeds that we plant in the ground, they have living embryos inside them. And when you plant a seed in the ground and the water hits that embryo and it begins to grow and it throws down the radical and then it shoots up the petiole, not the petiole. No, I won't think of it. But as it begins to grow, it's just amazing. It's just amazing how complex that creation is. I want to show you. This is my show and tell for today. This is a Chinese cabbage that we started from seed. It was part of the test run in the germination chamber. And it's the only thing, well, I've got some peppers and stuff, but they're, 1.5 inches tall. We started the onions outside before we had the germination chamber. And I saw Steve Toonstra got his onions in. I did not get my onions in yet this year, and I'm not worried about it. I'll be able to get them in. I would think the ground's going to dry out again sometime. But well, you're welcome, Country Homestead Preacher. I've got a little time here if anybody has a comment that they'd like to make further or a question. I saw Jules had made a comment. I was going to. Jules said that his grandpa always used to use manure 10-10-10, lime, sulfur, just to ensure the basics were right. You can't, I know I'm not organic. I'm never going to be. That commercial fertilizer, that 10-10-10, that 14-14-14 balanced fertilizer, and you can buy 5-5-5. You can buy it any way you want. Practically. They make 20-20-20. Although I'll tell you, I would be really careful using anything that's that heavy in nutrient. That's a lot of nutrient in there, and some of those can become kind of unstable if they get wet and sit. So if you ever had a bag of fertilizer get wet and you leave it sit for 2 or 3 days, you come back, put your hand in it, it'll burn you. So, and that's the potassium that's reacting with the water. So, but absolutely, if in doubt, sulfur is not going to be a problem, especially if you're using a reasonable amount. Maybe a 300 pounds an acre, something like that. So do the math and bring that down to whatever size you're farming at.
Sodium. What's sodium ash? Soda ash. Mike the Caveman.
Mike the Caveman is saying potassium heating up. Yeah. There's a great video. If you do a little searching on potassium, you'll find a great video where a guy takes elemental potassium and drops it in water, and it explodes. It's really disturbing. Yeah, soda ash is another. So that's a lot of potassium in there. And so the ash part of it is certainly going to be sodium. Thank you, Amy, very much. Voon, I've never made you a moderator on my site because you do so much on everybody else's site. And Amy does so much on everybody else's site. I almost feel guilty making you do that. So, yeah, Mike says he saw that in science class when they, Steve's going to make a video on strawberries. We're going to watch that one. We haven't, well, we'll see. I don't know how well we've done on strawberries. We planted, 4 years ago, we planted rhubarb, and I've yet to get, people tell me rhubarb is the easiest thing in the world to grow. And I think maybe it's too acidic where I've got it. Maybe it's, I've got them planted where I had the chickens. And so I don't know, maybe that ground is too hot for them to grow in, but they just don't seem to do very well. Now we're going to do a little bit more with antibacterial soap, or with not antibacterials, with agricultural soap to take care of some of those bugs early, and we'll see how that works out. Craze Family Homestead, I'm planting rhubarb this year. I'm putting it in the shade. Yeah, my grandfather always grew rhubarb in the shade, and I think we're pretty much pretty much anywhere in my property is direct sun. In Illinois, by the time summer comes, the sun is really directly above us. So there's not too much shade unless you've got a building and you're on the north side of the building. Vineyard Chicks, welcome. Glad you were able to come show up here. So, anyone else?
It's Voone's birthday.
It's Voone's birthday. Well, we got to sing happy birthday to Voone. You guys are all on your honor because I can't see you. We're going to sing happy birthday to Voone. Everybody ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Voone child. Happy birthday to you. Now Voone is probably laughing because I mispronounced her last name. But yeah, Jan, soda ash would be, any kind of ash is going to be highly acidic. So that's one of the things that's nice about it, because you can use it to adjust your pH into the more acid range. Of course, most things, it's easier. It's easier to adjust your pH down than it is to adjust it up. You can't add alkalinity. You can put things down to help make the soil more alkaline, but when you put stuff like ash of any kind, it's going to add acidity by nature. So now comes the portion where the people from Will It Grow, cover your ears because I'm going to talk directly to Team Woodcutter. One secret that I have in growing really huge, gigantic vegetables is you need to use salt. Take rock salt and put it around your vegetables. They will grow so big. Okay, Will It Grow people, you can come back. We're gonna have quite a competition here. Mike, now I could be wrong, so we'll check on this afterwards and clear it up if I'm wrong on that. But your ash is going to be, I believe it's going to end to be acidic. And the reason that I believe that is if you mix ash and water together, it will destroy anything, any metal container that it's in, it'll destroy it. And that's one of the things. Well, of course, I'm not sure, but that's why your wood stoves are constantly, rusty, and every year you've got to clean them up and put a new coat of paint on them. But we'll check that out.
You just need to let them know you're joshing.
Yeah, I was kidding about that salt, guys. So Conrad Homestead says, I hear Epsom salt may be beneficial. Have you ever used it in the garden? So Epsom salt will have a very short-lived positive effect that will, so it has a short-term positive, and then because it's so available, it drops off quickly. And so whatever benefit that's, Conrad Homestead, you're right, it's caustic. So that doesn't necessarily mean, that's what I was thinking always, it doesn't necessarily mean it's acidic. Because it could be very alkaline, could also be caustic. So I don't know if I'm going to read that one out loud, but Jules Small Gardening has an interesting comment. Yeah, soda is going to be a neutralizer. That's true. So soda ash, yeah, we can learn something all the time. You know, when it comes to some of these home remedies, I look at several things. One, whenever it says do this and watch what happens, I always figure I'm not doing that, because if it's that great, everyone's going to do it. You know, it's kind of like a fad diet. For example, eggshells. People talk all the time. You see all these channels where they're saying, crush up eggshells and put them with your plants. Well, yeah, you'll get calcium and you'll get potassium out of eggshells, but you won't get it this year. You know, it'll take a long time before that comes into the ground. Epsom salt's the other way. It's very quickly goes into the ground. If you want to see a really good video on why you shouldn't use Epsom salt, the Canadian gardener did a series of videos debunking a lot of these things. And I started watching her because of that series, and then I've watched a bunch of her other stuff. Pretty incredible, the information. She's actually a formally trained soil scientist with a minor in plant biology. So really a wellspring of knowledge. You know, you'll see the guy, he's going to use an eggshell and he's going to plant something in the eggshell. Sure, it'll work. You can plant something in a porcelain dish. It'll work. The plant will grow, but it's not going to get any nourishment from that shell. It'll take forever. For it to get any potassium or any calcium or anything else out of that. Yeah, you know, Conrad Hopeson, you're exactly right. To try to improve the soil slowly and continuously, but you know, that's like, well, I don't. So, all right. When people talk about growing a food forest, the first thing that comes to my mind, and it could be because I'm simple-minded, but the first thing that comes to my mind is it's going to take 40, 50 years before you get, you know, if you're planting black walnut trees, I don't know, 20 years before you get a black walnut, I would think. And if you're planting it from seed, you're probably 4 years before you've got a plant big enough to make it, you know. Same thing with, you know, a lot of this stuff. Now, I'm not saying that the whole principle of sustainable food forest isn't a great idea, but I'm just saying it's not something that's going to affect. I don't have enough life left, I hope, to see a black walnut tree feed me, you know. Country Homestead Preacher says, so if I've been using crushed eggshells for the last 4 years in my garden, do you think it's helping any yet? Yeah, probably by 4 years. Probably at the end of 2 years, you'll have some benefit. What I would recommend, if you're gonna, if you want to put eggshells, do something. Well, first of all, we crush up our eggshells and feed them back to our chickens because the chickens need the calcium out of those eggshells. Of course, they get a lot of calcium just eating stuff in the garden. But you need to crush them up before you give them to them because you don't want them eating something that they can recognize as an eggshell or they'll start eating the eggs. And you do not want that. Now, we're just eating the shells there, Jules, not the whole egg. But put it in a mulch pile. Now, we have a mulch pile. We don't produce our own mulch. I mean compost pile, not mulch pile. bring in compost. Last year we brought in, I don't know, truckload of compost. This year we'll bring in a truckload. I just couldn't produce enough to make it worth my while. So, but composting's tricky business too, especially if you're going to try to get to a finished compost, where you're going to put a lot of compost over a single area. I spread horse manure across the entire field and work that in. So Conrad Homestead says, walnuts seem to create more problems than they are worth in a food forest. With the jugalone chemical, I think pecans, chestnuts, hickory make more sense. Yeah, actually, I think Jason Avers was saying something about walnuts not being too good too. I'll tell you my quick walnut story. One of my first vegetable gardens, not my father's gardens, but my first vegetable garden was at my house in Carpentersville. And right along the driveway, there was a fence line. I had about 4 feet maybe between the driveway and the fence line. And I had some beautiful tomatoes planted there. And I decided I was making, at the time, I had bought 150 board foot of black walnut, and we were making wall sconces out of black walnut and selling them at the local antique shop. We also made some quilt racks out of black walnut, and they were pretty amazing. But what do you do with all of the planer chips from the black walnut? Because we bought this from a sawmill, and we ran it through the sawmill, and I just had stacks and stacks of black walnut. Well, I thought, hey, that'd be great. I'll put it out on my tomatoes. And I mulched those tomatoes with black walnut. And I will tell you that those tomatoes grew, they're probably some of the best tomatoes I ever grew. And then I picked one off and I took a big bite out of it. And I've never actually eaten ashes out of the ashtray, but I imagine that that's what it would taste like. They were just inedible tomatoes. And so be careful what you mulch with. Oak, red oak, white oak, don't use it.
Homestead Aquarius has a question.
Homestead Aquarius. Oh, no, he's not asking a question. He's giving an answer. So, very good. Amy, thank you for coming by, and thank you for dropping links. You are very appreciated. So I've got two little pieces of business before we completely part ways. One is what do people think of the new channel art? Did anybody notice that? I used it as the teaser to get you over here, so hopefully you saw it.
That 500 likes, so I can have that beard shaved off.
Well, then, Sandy, thank you again, Amy. Sandy wants to make sure that you guys remember that if we get 500 likes, I'm going to shave the goatee off and the rest of it. So, yeah, the thumbnail, that's what I meant. The thumbnail. So Wild Edibles is asking, is liquid fertilizer and dry fertilizer equal in absorbing? So I think liquid is fine. I think it does just as well. Some liquids absorb quicker, but there are actually liquids that have a sort of slow release to them. Yeah, so the Gypsy and the Vanilla Gorilla designed that for me, and oh, well, Wild Edibles, it's going to come back. So
You won't get that many.
Bushcraft is going to go make 500 accounts. So anyway, the thing you want to now, I meant to mention this earlier. We always want to try to water from the base. We want to try to water without getting anything on the leaves. The leaves are meant to handle it. They were created to handle it, but the leaves themselves, you'll start to get mold on them or mildew on them, and then you've got to use a mildicide. So if you can keep the water off as much as you can, and water from the base, we're putting drip line on everything this year. At least that's the plan at this point, is to get drip line on everything. And the beauty of that is when we get a drought, we're still going to be able to get just as much water on it as possible or as necessary. And so you watch your plants, you make sure that they're continuing to develop. You will make sure that leaves aren't turning brown. You also don't want them to turn yellow. Yellow is a mineral deficiency or a nutrient deficiency brought on by too much water. Jan says, shave your beard, Chicken Jenny. Well, get them to do one of those, what did you guys call those, love parades or whatever through the site, and everybody join. And then we'll get to 500.
Yeah,
we
but
can
if
go.
you shave it, John, it will grow's got to shave.
Steve, I made a video of the drip line and planting potatoes and cutting potatoes, and none of the, I'm going to try to save some of the footage, but I apparently had a lot of guck on the camera lens that I didn't realize. And we didn't get much. So Jules Small Gardening says that MB Heritage, just posted a imagine you mean drip line video you might find useful or inspirational. I'm going to go check it out. Yeah, drip line too. Okay. We have used drip tape. I had drip tape on my onions last year. The last several years I've had drip tape on my tomatoes. I don't know how you grow tomatoes without it anymore, because we have it on our young asparagus. We probably won't continue to water the asparagus now. Yeah, Mike is saying the biggest problem we had with drip tape in the past is when you go to cultivate and you come through. I like to use a stirrup. I've got a spade hoe that I really use a lot, and you cut through that drip tape. So this year we put the drip tape underneath the plants, directly underneath the plants. And the way that the transplanter is set up, everything we transplant will be that way. The seeded stuff, I've got a drip tape layer to put behind the tractor that I can just lay the drip tape with. A friend of mine gave it to me. They used to use it in their tree nursery, and so I'm going to use that. Jules Small Garden says his mower kept finding his. Yeah, we've cut up a lot of drip tape with the mower, and the worst part about it is it'll just pull a bunch of it up. It winds up underneath there, and then you're underneath with screwdrivers and knives trying to get all of the all of the drip tape back out. So, yeah, I think if you can get it down 2 to 3 inches in the soil, ours is going. The design is that it's 4 inches down, but you know how that works. You start moving with a tractor and it's going to go where it goes. And then really the difficult part for us is going to be at the header end. I'm going to actually bury my header. And then where the valve connects to the header, I'm going to put a paving block so that I can pull that off and open and shut. And it should work out fairly well. Yeah, Wild Edibles is saying she hand watered, but it killed her back. I agree. I've done a lot of hand watering. The first year we weren't able to get water out to the one side of the field, so I ended up buying 200 feet of hose, and you just keep, you've got to pick it back up and you've got to take it out. You can't just leave it there. And it was a nightmare. So then I built a water wagon, and I've got a spigot on the bottom of that, and we run the water that way. And so this year I think it's going to be a lot better. And in the future, I think we'll probably try to fertigate through the drip tape. We'll see how that works. But listen, it's 6 minutes after 8. I'm not sure if anybody's going on after me, but I would like to make sure that I don't go over on my time. So thank you for coming out. Thank you for all the comments on the last couple of videos and the thumbs up. YouTube really counts those thumbs up and the comments. This last video didn't really click the algorithm yet, but the one before it did. Will it grow? So you've been there the whole time just spying on me to see if I break the rules. Well, I didn't. And take a walk out to your mailbox tomorrow. I think you got something coming. It's been a while in the coming, but it's coming. Jules, you're welcome. Conrad, you're welcome. Next week, I will not be live Thursday night. I may try to put up a video. I'm not sure how well that's going to work, but I have another commitment next week, and so I won't be able to be out there. Happy birthday, Voon. Enjoy yourself. Have a keto shake on me. Just send me a bill and I'll pay for it.
And plant.
And plant. Hey, except for you people on Woodcutter, 2021, good gardeners don't plant woodcutters. Just kidding there. Will it grow? We got to plant. So, all right. I'm Chicken Johnny. Imitzer Shem. I'll see you again. Eat your vegetables. Hey, how do you turn this thing off?
You're still on.
This is nuts.